One thing to remember about Libra, again, is its extremity. And that one of the great lessons for Libra is balance. One of the things that can create extremity in Libra is always making oneself available to other people's needs, which are rooted in their expectations. What happens to the Aries polarity at this point? So when you find a strongly emphasized seventh house, strongly emphasized Libra archetype, Pluto in the seventh. One of your basic recommendations to such people, always remember to tune in or listen to your own inner instincts, Aries. And that when your instinct is telling you to get out, to go for a drive, to go for a walk, to go do something, all by yourself, to honor it, to act upon it right then. If so, and done consistently, then Libra can have balance by way of their relationships. And if not, what happens once the extremity is really reached, keeping in mind connecting points to Aries, Cancer, Capricorn, the natural square, you have a seething and increasing anger. And at some point, that anger will manifest. And it can manifest as a behavior, that is anger, that others in your environment who had not previously been seen it will be stunned. I've never seen her like that kind of voice. They're just blown up because of the anger. Libra's so concerned with being nice, wants to be nice. And if you've got this seething anger underneath it, and pretty soon it blows.
You were saying via Virgo, the denial of reality, but what you just described is something that I've always attributed to the Libra archetype, really that denial. Is that correct?
It's not so much a denial, because they know what they're doing. It's their functional reality. They know they're making themselves available to everyone else. What they're losing touch with is their own needs. That's the actual psychology.
But isn't that denial of one's needs then?
That's not so much a denial as in a sense of just getting so consumed in other people's realities they lose sight of it. So it's not so much a denial, they just lose sight of it. That's different than actual conscious denial. So, any questions on Libra here? See, one of once you go back in time, one of the signs that Libra correlates to in history is Rome. And really what you have in this here country, ancient Rome, and what you have here in this country, in a very, very large way, is a rebirth of Rome relative to America. If you actually study history, you'll see all kinds of parallels that will blow you away. To me, if people like Bush and Cheney were left to their devices unchecked, were they really trying to take us, unbeknownst to most people, as a model of ancient Rome? Very few people remember, because you don't study history anymore, that the only people allowed to vote in Rome, guess what, were wealthy people. And that the masses were there to serve the favored few, the ruling class. Do you see a parallel here? Vernon.
But if I remember right, didn't the United States start off that way? Because only property owners...
That's exactly got it. That's right, you got it. Good for you. That's exactly right. And of course, then for a long time, only men could vote. And pretty soon women could. Of course, black people couldn't. Of course, American Indians couldn't.
That actually isn't true, because I just saw a movie about...
What's not true?
The women didn't get to vote till 50 years. They gave, after the Civil War, black males were given the vote, but no women were given the vote until World War I. Not even white women had the vote until
Oh, that's- so you're telling me the black men were allowed to vote after the Civil War?
Well, yeah.
Well,
Yes and
legally.
no. Yes and no. as
They
we
were
both
given
know.
the legal right to vote. Some states did things to prevent them from voting, but they
Oh, well.
legally were allowed to vote. But women weren't even legally allowed to vote until 50 years after them.
Mm-hmm. But the functional reality for black men is they couldn't vote, despite the law.
Yes.
In any case, I'm just trying to show you some parallels. If you would actually study history, study the structure of ancient Rome, it'll blow you away, the parallels to this time. And here we have one of their emperors currently is apparently the president. And just as ancient Rome had all kinds of shenanigans in terms of who would be an emperor, connect that to this, in quotes, last election. Yeah.
I see the connections from Rome to the United States, but I didn't quite get the connection between the Liber archetype and Rome.
I'm just saying that Rome, going back through history, connects with Libra. That's all I'm trying to say. But that you have a rebirth of many souls that come from that time into this time. How many of you have got Neptune and Libra? Ah.
I have a question. In your book, Pluto and the 10th, you were talking about how the U.S. eventually will fall.
Mhm.
Is that in your relationship just that you made in regards to Rome and it fell? Was there some symbology that way as well in regards? I'm curious.
I mean, you can already begin to see the seeds now if the U.S. continues on as it is. I mean, it's already being progressively isolated by the world based on the policy of these goons. Right now, the United States around the world is, as you probably know, thought of as the most dangerous country on earth. Despite the mealy mouth of Bush, we're promoting freedom. We're perceived around the world as the greatest threat. Think of it. Now, what if that's sustained? What if these creeps are reelected? And the policies become ever worse? Just look where that could go.
I just wanted to say that, I don't know, have you looked at John Kerry's chart? Because I've studied it quite a bit.
Mhm.
It seems to me, and my personal experience with him too, is that he's diametrically opposed to Bush. Unlike some people actually believe, they think he's, in some way similar to him, but
He has nothing to do with
diametrically
it, yeah.
opposed to him.
I totally agree with you, and that's what I find fascinating. I'll just show you a little bit of synastry here. Maybe we could speculate on the meaning, but we have to remember that the USA chart has South Node in Aquarius. And then when Bush was appointed president, Neptune was on its South Node. And Kerry's South Node is Aquarius. The combined South Node between Bush and Cheney, composite, Aquarius. Cheney's in Aquarius. And Bush has Ceres in Aquarius. All this within a few degrees. Now this has to have some sort of meaning here. And one of the meanings of Aquarius is what? How a social system is organized. So we're either, with the North Node and Leo USA chart, so we're either going to continue via these goons to promote a progressively unequal society, favoring the few, Zarathustra, or we're going to have what Kerry/Democrats promote, social systems which were much more equitable for all concerned. That's our choice. I mean, to me, again, if the media would just do its job, which is to educate via facts, not spinning facts, but educating through facts, there'd be no way that these guys could get reelected. Zero. It wouldn't be possible. But because we have a media that's in cahoots via the corporations, it's iffy.
Could you talk a little bit about the Pluto and Libra generation and how that follows the Leo-Virgo generation?
I'd like to talk more on how it connects to the Pluto-Leo generation. What you find generally with your Pluto following signs, Leo, Virgo, you generally find an antagonism at a soul level. But because of the semi-sextile, it's an irritant, it's an irritating aspect. But when you draw on the sextile, this is why grandparents connect with grandchildren. And why parents have a lot of problems with their own children. See? So, the Pluto and Leo, or the Pluto and Libra generation, in many ways will connect, not all, but many, to the original spirit of the Pluto and Leo generation, which was initially to rebel against what? The Pluto and Cancer crowd, and all the values and realities that those values dictated. Betty Crocker, Marlboro Man, Beaver Cleaver.
Conditional loving.
All of it. And Leo burst upon the scene and says, I will have none of this. The Pluto and Libra crowd, a certain percentage based on evolution, are trying to recreate in their own ways that Pluto and Leo spirit. But they're not doing it in the way that Pluto-Leo did, as in student protests, student demonstrations, mass marches. The Pluto-Libra, as we speak, are doing it much more via Aquarius connection in smaller, isolated groups at the moment.
And more cooperatively?
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's not yet a mass movement.
Right.
So. Okay, let's move into Scorpio then.
Anatomy. What about anatomy?
Well, it's the same anatomy of Venus and Taurus. You have your connection to kidneys, ducts within the kidneys, the renal canal, and all the rest of it. Heart chakra. Now, when we come into Scorpio, let's deal with bust up one myth in traditional astrology. You've probably read in your books that Libra connects to the archetype of marriage. It does not. That which connects the idea of marriage is Scorpio. And Libra, we're initiating a diversity of relationships with a diversity of types in order to learn not only about ourselves, but to learn about the relativity of reality in general. In Scorpio, we learn to make choices. The phenomenon of choice making is Scorpio. When you link this with union with other people / marriage, we are making choices to be with specific types that we've learned to identify relative to the social milieu of Libra. You see my point? This type I can relate to. This type I can't. And also remember that even in historical terms, a relationship was not considered a marriage until it was consummated. What is the 8th house if it's not sexual union? Vernon.
And Libra is partnership, whereas Scorpio is true marriage.
I'm sorry?
Libra is partnership, whereas Scorpio is true marriage.
Right.
Is that what I'm?
But we can also be married to our partner. We're talking about the issue of commitment to another. That's what determines a marriage beyond the sex. True total commitment. True total commitment to another is not Libra. I can give to what somebody else needs, but that doesn't imply total commitment. Total commitment to another is Scorpio. Even the idea of commitment itself is Scorpio. Union is Scorpio, linked with the Pisces Cancer triad. Sexual union, obviously Scorpio. Scorpio is a natural water, yin, and fixed. From the point of view of consciousness, it correlates with the psychology of consciousness. The psychology of consciousness starts with the nature of one's emotional body. Now, given that it's yin, you have an inward-looking, introspective archetype. When you link with the psychology of consciousness, you can now see the basis of one's own personal self-penetration in order to understand the nature of one's own psychology, which is rooted in their emotional reality. Conversely, because of uniting with other people by way of committed relationship, this also is trying to make an understanding of other people's psychology, other people's motives, other people's agendas. Motivations, intentions, and agendas manifest through the Scorpio archetype. These are reflections of desires. Desires emanate from the soul. Thus, agendas, motives, and so forth. You see the connection now? Scorpio, because of the inward-looking nature of the thing, wants to penetrate to the cause of anything. The famous bottom line. Relative to the polarity of Taurus, need, we can also have, in order to get one's needs met, we can also have the horrible specter of manipulation of another to get one's needs met. Use of another to get one's needs met. Now, the deepest issue on a psychological and genetic level of Scorpio is mutation. It is evolution itself. Now, mutation is very different than Aquarius transformation. Many people want to lump these sort of terminologies together as if they're one thing. They're not. Mutation is a specific process in which a form becomes a radically different form relative to mutation. Caterpillar, cocoon, butterfly. That's mutation. I.e. radically different. Transformation is taking an existing thing and simply transforming what it already is. Scorpio is about mutation. Scorpio is an archetype, 8th house Pluto is about fusion. It's about union, it's about merging. When you have fusion, merging, and so forth, that which is being fused with allows for a mutation. in such a way that the two forms become larger and bigger than they were as individual forms. Look what happens when we make sex. We make baby. Fusion, union, mutation. Now, one of the secrets about, let's be delicate in our explanation.
Why?
I want the bottom line.
This is Pluto, man.
You're on camera.
We're going to be talking in a rather graphic way about sexual karma. Every human being on earth carries their entire evolutionary and karmic background, among other places, in their sexual fluids. Now, I'm only saying this by way of Virgo. To have this awareness means, obviously, to exercise some degree of discrimination with whom we are sleeping with. Because when we sleep with somebody and exchange fluids, we're essentially Scorpio, Pluto, 8th house, osmosing the other into us and vice versa. And thus we're bringing into ourselves that other person or persons' entire evolutionary and karmic background, and thus altering our own life course as a result. Now, a simple way to demonstrate the obvious truth. For whomever we have slept with, like it or not, is it not true that these people are more deeply embedded in you than people that you have not slept with? There's your truth. And how many, through Aquarius objectivity, can step back, look at their past, and see the fact of what I'm saying, that you're with those that you have slept with, for better or worse. Your own life path has been altered in some way. Yes or no?
Yes.
That's called sexual karma.
Okay, how do I get rid of it?
Well, happily, God made a ritual for this purpose. And see, this is another true example of Mars being a lower octave of Pluto. There's a ritual, 8th house. Rituals are Scorpio, 8th house Pluto, that one can perform. It's called the Agni ritual. Agni means fire. Mars, fire. And Mars is an intrinsically purifying thing. Fire is. So what one can do to sever, 8th house, Mars, sever the karmic umbilical cord between yourself and whomever you're trying to be free of. It doesn't have to just be because of sexual union, but whomever. And the way that the Agni ritual is performed is one wants to visualize a fire in the third eye. If you're not able to do that, you simply make a candle in a dark room. And whatever images, keeping in mind here the Cancer, images, see? Whatever images are coming to you of the person that you're trying to be free of, you project those images into the fire until there's no more imagery to project. And along the way, making the following inner statement / affirmation. I forgive you, Pisces. I forgive you from the point of view of accepting the responsibility in my own actions. Who made the choice, Scorpio, to be with that person in the first place? So you continue to make this affirmation and project the imagery until there's no imagery left to project. When that state is reached, you have then severed the karmic and biblical cord.
Can you repeat the affirmation?
I forgive you from the point of view of accepting the responsibility in my own actions, i.e., who made the choice to be with that person in the first place.
So could you say that if someone has been raped in another lifetime, they chose to be sexually with that person?
Say it again?
If someone has been raped in this lifetime, there could be another lifetime of making a conscious choice to be...
Well, again, there are many determinants that could equal the event of rape. And it doesn't always mean that the person who's doing the raping has been involved with that person in prior life. This is where you have to be very, very careful with these sort of things. So we have to see, in each case, what the total dynamics are. We can't make a general, yeah.
Is the osmosis of the karma different for men and women, as the woman is the one who's kind of injected into with the sexual fluids?
No, because women also have sexual fluids that come through osmosis to man's skin. That make intuitive sense to you? Yeah. So anyway, to me, without being a stupid moralist, to me this is just from an evolutionary point of view, the reason to affect some degree of sexual discrimination. And you see, what's underneath this, I mean, let's go into this a moment. One of the normal attractors between people are called pheromones. It's a natural scent that the body emits. Pheromones in astrology are Taurus. Remember procreational instinct? Pheromones in natural law serve as a natural selection of whom is sleeping with whom. But that's why you have the whole phenomena called attraction or repulsion. None of us are attracted to every human being on earth to have sex with. Most of it's a repulsion. Yes?
Yes.
These are natural selectors, pheromones. But let me give you an example. How many of us in this room, if we're honest, we're setting up a situation to have sex. Something's happened to bring two people together, and yet our instinctual reaction to the other is repulsion. And yet we go ahead and have sex anyway. You're now in violation of natural law. You're in violation of natural selection. And then you wonder in terms of what kinds of souls are being produced out of such a union. Get it? That's just an objective way of looking at this stuff.
How do condoms fit into this?
That's a good question. Cause and effect.
I'm not quite sure the basis of your question, Landon.
Interface of fluids.
Hmm?
Interface of fluids.
What about French
no-
kisses?
It's still, the fluids still leak through the microscopic hole.
I had a feeling you were going to say that. I just need your confirmation. Thank you.
Okay.
I know, I'm
Yes,
crazy
ma'am.
friend and she's
Aren't
embarrassed.
you merging more than just, wouldn't you be merging more than just your sexual fluid?
Yes.
You're in union too,
Yes,
so
psychic.
you're still seems like absorb something
Sure.
in other bodies.
Right. It really depends on how far you want to go with somebody. I mean, there's obviously, I mean, we all probably know the difference that we can be with a certain type and we have this feeling of we can't get far enough inside of them. It's like wanting this feeling want to get through their skin. Now imagine those two people having sex. compared to others that, basically the only thing united is this, and they basically have stiff arms. They're just performing the function. So really it depends on the degree of merging. You see? Okay. A good way to validate all of this, go interview a prostitute sometime. Look in their eyes. And you're going to see lots of people. Most of them have no clue anymore of who they actually are. Not a clue. So, on a sexual level, evolutionarily speaking, Scorpio is the entire dynamic between sex in a very profane way. Sex is power. Sex is rape. Sex is domination. Sex is control. All the way from that ugly place to utilizing, through natural law, sexual energy to metamorphosize consciousness itself, to be used as a vehicle to actually contact and experience the inner Godhead. The fancy word that comes through history that demonstrates that type of sexuality is called tantra. And so we have the full spectrum, everything within that. And from the point of view of natural law, friends, there is, in fact, anybody that still wants to believe it, there is no natural conflict between spirit and flesh. One of the ultimate teachings of Libra, which I forgot to state, one of the great secrets of Libra is moderation/balance in all things. And so when you link this to sexual life, moderation and balance in all things. Is this stuff clear to you? Okay. Anybody throw rotten eggs at me or no? Okay.
I have a question.
Okay.
In the 60s, people were
Mm-hmm.
very
Free love.
You like to have one candle and do like a mass.
Thanks for sharing your history now. For that, astrologically, it's interesting because in that free love time, Uranus is transiting Libra. And Neptune is transiting Scorpio. That's why we had flower power, Neptune and Scorpio. And all the drugs alter consciousness and all this. But the answer is yes. Just gather them all up, and just keep projecting until there's nothing left to project.
I might be there all night, but.
You might need a bonfire.
Or a condom.
Now, at a lesser level, mundane level, Scorpio is also about making agreements or contracts with other people. It's about forming businesses. It's about forming business with other people. It's about death. Now, it's about genetics. Pluto, Scorpio, 8th house is the genetic structure of the human organism. It's RNA, DNA. Now, It's about rebirth. It's about reincarnation. And see, one little silly thing that human beings, some, are trying to accomplish is this delusive quest for immortality. I forgot what they call it, cryonics and all this crap. Now, death is genetically programmed. There's an actual thing in vernacular that can be called a death enzyme that emanates from the pituitary as we get older, leading to progressive degeneration of various organs and functioning of the body, so that in fact it can die. Now, the reason I mention this is kind of in a bizarre humor sort of way. How many of you, relative to the delusion of immortality, from an egocentric view, how many of you would like to be in the same cage for eternity? The same problems, the same successes, the same da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Doesn't that seem rather stupid? Ew. So, now, anatomically, genetically, Pluto again correlates with the entire genetic structure, the genetic coding, RNA, DNA, chromosomes. Pluto, Scorpio 8th house, has a direct correlation to the pancreas, insulin, digestive enzymes, a direct correlation to what are called polymers, which as they get bombarded by what are called free radicals, generate a breaking down of the entire organism, leading to death. This is actually one of the areas that certain geneticists are trying to experiment with, i.e. preventing the breakdown of the polymers, which are at the end of every genetic string or code. They will fail. Pluto in combination with Mars, like we said before, has a direct connection with the tetrasome, testes, penis, co-rulership of Jupiter, the liver, relative to the intestine and colon. This is Pluto, Scorpio, 8th house. The entire issue of the health of the colon and the intestine has everything to do with the nature of bacteria, the nature of viruses.
Does it also include parasites?
Parasites, fungus,
I'm sorry?
fungus.
Okay, thank you.
And you can then see by way of the immune system in general is Pisces, but you can then see relative to the phenomena of vaccinations that various bacterias and viruses mutate relative to vaccination. Why? They have their own survival instinct. Taurus. Now, most of you are aware of where this can lead, as our current vaccinations, particularly starting with penicillin, will no longer work. Then what? Then what? You have no idea what's coming down here on this planet, friends. And it's not the way it's going to be the way you think. It's going to be through the inability of the organism to protect itself against disease. They'll make a mass culling of the population on this planet. So despite all the other New Age bullshit, this is where it's coming from. Mark the words. And the reason for that is that the human organism is out of control. If you stood back and looked at Earth from the point of view of a telescope / microscope, the human organism would be comparable to cancer cells in the human body. And just as the human body, via the immune system, will attempt to isolate the cancer cells in order to survive. No different than the totality of Gaia, eliminating it or isolating at some point the offending organism, which is creating an imbalance, Libra, for all other organisms. It's just that simple.
What is Gaia?
Gaia is the totality of consciousness on this earth. It's like earth consciousness, the planet itself. If you already know that if nature is left to itself, it regulates itself in a state of ongoing balance and harmony. If you have an out-of-control rabbit population, like we used to have up in the San Juans, the male rabbits every 7 years would create a sexual disease where they couldn't reproduce, all by itself. Nobody had to intervene. Nature's like that. And now we have one organism called human that's responsible, as we speak, for extincting over 100 other life forms on our planet daily. Daily. Disturbing the intrinsic balance of the inherent biosphere of the entire planet. Now, how long can that go on? Think about it. So at some point there will be this culling effect. And it will be tragic. Alrighty, let's get on to a happier topic. Well, we gotta talk about it.
Oh, Sagittarius.
I just had a question about all of the immunizations for the children, and if there's any connection to the autism that's coming up?
Yes. That's exactly right.
Vaccinations?
There's a lot of complications that have yet to be realized because of the vaccinations, particularly as they pharmaceutically interact. One of the great disservices that many of the pediatricians are doing is that they're putting in too many vaccinations at the same time. And it creates a pharmaceutical reaction that they have no idea of. So, let's have a break first. And it also has everything to do with boils and tumors. Boils and tumors.
Tumors. What a combination. Pimples too?
Pimples. These archetypes have everything to do with elimination, i.e. eliminating toxin, with part of which is feces. Feces is Scorpio.
That's why the 8th house is bullshit.
The feces is just a byproduct of what is being absorbed into the system. That's what Scorpio does. Okay. Anything you want to ask about the Scorpio archetype, Pluto, 8th house? I guess the only other thing to add to it is things like, when people talk to the dead and this sort of thing, that's also Scorpio. Going into a state of trance in consciousness, a trance state is Scorpio.
Jeffrey,
Mm-hmm.
there was one distinction that you made in language I didn't quite get, and it was mutation, metamorphosis versus transformation.
Well, just think about it. Mutation, again, is the simple example of a caterpillar goes into cocoon, comes out as a butterfly, a mutated form. Transformation is taking the same caterpillar, I can't always find the English. And there's going to be no cocoon. What is it can take, say, a caterpillar and change it. We're not going to change it to a butterfly, but we can add this to the caterpillar and add that to the caterpillar. That's transforming the caterpillar.
You didn't want to talk about the compulsions.
Compulsions, yes. That's definitely Scorpio, which is rooted in what we think we need. Taurus.
But also just from habitual lifetime accumulation, would that be what it comes?
Compulsion for the same?
Habitual lifetime
Sure.
repetition.
Oh, sure, and that's typically manifests as compulsions towards another person or persons. That can lead into very interesting phenomena for people. I mean, there's some souls try to utterly attach themselves to other souls. The phenomena of possession is Scorpio, being possessed. There's another thing called trailer souls. Souls that they have such a lack of an ability to actualize within themselves that they attach themselves to other souls for that same actualization process. It's a form of vicarious actualization following Taurus polarity. The phenomena of evil from the point of view of the manifested creation. Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces. Evil comes through Scorpio. And the intention of evil is to maintain human delusion / separating desire. The existence of evil itself is dependent on human delusion. Anything that keeps any sort of soul disconnected from the source of that soul, evil will try to accomplish. Evil works through our negative emotions. And that's why we have to be very, very careful with ourselves when we find ourselves in a negative emotional state. One of the ways that evil can operate is to take something that is intrinsic to ourself. Let's say I happen to have, through Scorpio, an emphasized emotional fear of loss, abandonment, or betrayal. That's just intrinsic to me. And let's say that my partner does something that triggers these intrinsic fears. Evil can come into that and so horribly distort and magnify that intrinsic fear within me, and I'm having no capacity to know that that's what's happening. Then by magnifying it, I now project it on that partner. Then what reality am I creating? A reality that didn't have to exist in the first place. And the intention of which is to create ever more havoc, chaos, and problem making. Evil. And, many people have a real hard time even admitting evil exists. And it's just not something we like to look at. But it's the counterpart to God.
He doesn't want us to look at it either.
And see, one of the psychological states that evil has a field day in is the psychology of victimization.
Is that eighth house?
Huh?
Is that eighth house?
Victimization is Pisces. The way that Yogananda explained evil, you know, and believe it or not, Yogananda, for the most of the life of Yogananda, up until his last years, believe it or not, Yogananda actually thought that evil was only a function of belief. Didn't think it was a real existence. Yogananda, of all people. And you can't have much more of a highly evolved soul. And, but he, for his own ongoing evolution, God made sure that he understood the reality of it, and it did manifest in SRF. It first manifested through various of his disciples. They were now leaving SRF through their own delusions that evil was generating. An example, one of these people came to be at SRF and was there a very short amount of time, and evil got a hold of him. And after that, he started projecting onto Yogananda, of all people, that Yogananda was a charlatan. And that this person's mission was to expose Yogananda. Of all things. Yogananda's response, by the way, once the white guy went back to Florida, was he simply sent him a carton of oranges once a year with a note, "I still love you." But in time, the disciples were leaving, and then finally it degenerated into Yogananda's body. And evil created a scenario in Yogananda, despite how godful he was, where his limbs, his legs, became essentially useless, paralyzed through evil. So this is a way of God teaching Yogananda. And in fact, a related story comes through one of his key disciples, Kriyananda. He and I were actually really good friends at one point in his life. He's a great man. In any case, Kriyananda at that point didn't have any belief in evil. And at that point in SRF's history, there was not enough room for all the disciples, so he built himself a little hut or something, or shack on the lawn. And he got into an experiment. And he said, okay, I'm going to test this thing of evil, challenging its existence. And so he made some inner thought thing. He said, if evil is real, I want to know it right now. Well, sure enough, this little hut starts vibrating and shaking, and here comes the smell of sulfur and all the rest that evil does. And he got so fucking scared. I mean, literally scared out of his wits. And all he could do was pray to Yogananda. And as soon as he called upon Yogananda, it all went away. And from that point forwards, he then made his little hut. He made wallpaper of Yogananda pictures. But evil does exist, and the way Yogananda explained it was that as creation was being created, there were certain entities that what we call God created to assist in the creation. Christians want to call these archangels, for example. And one of the archangels was this thing that is now called Lucifer. And one of the tasks that God, according to Yogananda, gave Lucifer was to come to planets like this, in order to serve the entities on that planet, to assist them to come back to God. And this thing that we call Lucifer, when he was so instructed, rebelled. Remember, God's the origin of free choice. Rebelled against the instruction. The delusion that Lucifer created for himself was, well, wait a minute. If you're going to send me to these various places, they should be serving me. Not me serving them. So once that delusion was created by way of Lucifer / rebellion against God, he was then, of course, cast away from God, and then became the counterpoint to God that we now call evil. Its own consciousness. And this is why I said a moment ago that one of the greatest breeding grounds of evil is victimization. Because at that point, Lucifer itself felt victimized by God.
This is a little off, but I know that from the conference that Lucifer is put into the charts. Is it an asteroid?
Yeah, it's an asteroid.
How would it have been chosen that that little asteroid would represent
The reason is
a
that,
powerful thing?
because, think about it. How many people are able to perceive evil? Evil is 99% unseen and unperceived by most. So is it really any mystery that it's hiding within the asteroid belt? Or so far away as symbolized by Pluto that we can't physically see it? So,
Is that symbol in solar fire?
Hmm?
I wasn't sure if that symbol was even, that's not even.
there's a website, the Dina.
Steve knows the info.
Well, I found a Lucifer ephemeris, which I'm going to post on the forum when I get back.
Good. Yeah, by the way, for all you new students, there's a brand new message board for EA that I conduct. It's a very recent thing that Steve made for me, bless his heart. And it's very, very secret. It's not being advertised. You can't even find it through search engines. We do this deliberately. So I'm going to share that address with you so you can participate in the ongoing EA forums. But you have to promise me that you do not give out this address to anyone else. And that's a solemn promise.
Well, you better not say it on tape then.
Ah. Good eye. Why don't you turn that off just for a second? I know. So yes, and by way of understanding evil in the horoscope, one, the archetypes that it manifests through, of course, can be Scorpio, i.e. where the house that Scorpio is on, planets that are in Scorpio, Pluto itself, its house. And what we've been observing now for, I don't know how many years now, 5 or 6 maybe. We've been observing it through the asteroid of Lucifer. And I've also been retrofitting it to history, so I can observe it that way. And folks, it works like clockwork. As an example, when this whole thing with Kosovo was happening, another kind of genocide, Lucifer was transiting right over Kosovo to geodetic equivalence. Coincidence or synchronicity? When the whole thing with the Twin Towers happened, the blow up in New York, emanating out of Afghanistan, guess where Lucifer was? Over Kabul, Afghanistan. And so on. It's just like clockwork.
Well, can you talk a little bit, Lucifer's in Cancer now, is that correct?
No, it's in Taurus. Just snuck into Taurus.
2 to 4 Taurus, 2 to 4 degrees Taurus.
And can you talk about what that means?
Well, let me also flush this in, because
Okay.
Lucifer literally translates into bearer of light. And that also means within the Lucifer symbol is God. But here it goes back to the origin story. See?
Could you do that, Gleb?
Hmm?
Could you do the Gleb What does it look like?
I don't know, you wanna?
I don't know it.
It's like a V with a thing in it.
Oh, that's right. It's just a V with a line.
Right.
Yeah.
A low. The line is
Low, low.
So within the symbol of Lucifer, as an asteroid, we have God and evil. Bearer of light. So don't you see the magic in that symbol? That what the apparent problems that can be created through the influence of evil are also solved through the same symbol once we reorientate the consciousness to God. Don't you see the magic? It's an incredible symbol. So that means that wherever we have our natal Lucifer, we can be simultaneously influenced by evil and God. God's always trying to get our attention. And simultaneous to that fact, so is Lucifer. Again, its existence is dependent on the maintenance of human delusion
So it could be your
via
greatest,
negative emotion.
it could be your greatest weakness or your greatest strength. Could be your greatest weakness or your greatest strength.
That's exactly right.
What would be the significance of Lucifer coming to the nodes, because it's coming to the nodes?
Hmm?
What would be the significance of Lucifer coming to the nodes, because it's in Taurus at 2 degrees coming to the nodes?
To the nodes?
Yeah, the
Huh?
nodes are in.
Scorpio. Well, I think what we're seeing here, I mean, you can link it to different, if we just put it in real time,
Right,
we can see how it's coming to head, at least in this country,
right,
relative to this thing we call Bush Cheney.
right.
And then what are we looking at? Scorpio, Taurus. We're looking at ulterior agendas. All relative to transfers of wealth to people that are already wealthy.
Right. Perceived needs, project.
Relative to becoming like Rome, the dominant country on this whole earth. That's why they invented when they attack this new policy of Bush's.
No tolerance?
Unilateral,
Preemptive war.
Right.
like what they did with Iraq. I don't know what the name they've given this new policy, where they attack first.
Preemptive war.
Preemptive.
Preemptive, yeah.
No different than Rome did. That's my,
Right,
or what he's calling through Taurus, the ownership society.
yeah.
Taurus.
What is the time frame of the whole cycle?
Hmm?
What's the time frame of the whole cycle?
Lucifer? Lucifer will generally stay in his sign 3 months.
3 months?
Yeah, and it has a three-year cycle.
It's an erratic orbit, though, is it?
If it's in Taurus.
It's relative, it goes retrograde too.
Right.
Yeah.
What is your understanding of the new planet, this Sedna?
I have none, because it needs to be observed and correlated for a great length of time. That's astrology. And see, one of the problems in some people that get into astrology, they think they can invent it. Versus doing what astrology is, which is correlating and observing a phenomena over a length of time. You know, and it's one of the greatest weaknesses, and it's, so right now we can't know. And I think, you know, if we look at the nature of the history of astrology, we have to allow for natural evolution to take place. We're in a very accelerated state of evolution relative to what are called yugas. And that means that progressively, since we're on what's called an ascending arc, back to a state where the majority of consciousness is spiritualized. I think we're going to have to wait X amount of time to see what potential implication this has in that context. That's all I sense right now. So,
You know where in the tropical zodiac it was discovered?
where?
I don't.
I don't either. I guess all we need to do is look up the astronomy of it, and then we can convert it to the astrology. So,
Philip Sedgwick is the person to contact.
yeah, he's the master at this. He's the guy that does all that.
Yeah.
So anyway, to summarize all that stuff, just don't underestimate the power of evil. It's just as strong And if you link it even with the nature of the material creation, for example, most of you have learned that there's a thing called antimatter. And when antimatter collides with matter, it's a mutual exclude, it just destroys itself. So what they finally determined was that 51% of the material creation is matter. 49% is antimatter, which means that matter will always be sustained. When we link this with God and evil, 51% is God, 49% is evil. That's how close it is. Now,
Like the next election.
there you go. And see, the next election, friends, the transiting Lucifer. Now listen carefully. The USA Mars is a 21 Gemini. Cheney's natal Lucifer, 18 Gemini. Bush's North Node with Uranus, 20 Gemini. Guess where the Lucifer transit's going to be? Look, think of it.
And where will Pluto be? Not too far.
It'll be at 20 degrees of Scorpio. I mean of Sagittarius. Now you just think of the potential ramifications.
Time to move.
Hmm?
Time to move.
Yeah.
You know, and put that in the context of the USA Neptune, 20 Virgo. So we have the USA Mars squaring its natal Neptune. At the time of the election, it's affixed at Lucifer. Now, what is the potential capacity for deception of an election gone wrong?
And
Could
then
it also be exposure because Pluto's
Yeah.
opposing it? Couldn't they also be exposed because Pluto's opposing it?
Yes, that would be the hope. And see, my sense is we have to remember that this country is founded on freedom and honesty. So despite their, all their conceived plans, there's going to be enough people knowing the truth, which could potentially set in motion a social, think about it, Uranus and what could happen? Woo.
at the same time, they could use that to try to do something to expose something in Kerry, not, even if it's fabricated.
Right.
To bring him down, they have such a...
Look how they treat him in the commercials they make.
Oh, I know.
This is a sadistic cartoon.
I know. I mean, they have this extremely calculated agenda, so...
The sadism. Look what they reduce him to, this little stupid cartoon. Tell me that's not sadistic. In which everything in those advertisements are lies. And so what do you hear Bush saying? I authorize. He's authorizing lies. What a metaphor for his whole fucking administration. In a nutshell. Next time you hear those words on your TV, I'm George Bush and I...
Okay, come on, let's get to Sag. Somebody open a window, let's get to Sag.
Anyways, that stuff makes sense to you, right?
Yes. Yeah.
It just seems stuff we need to know, yeah? And we might not want to know it, but we need to know it. I've done the lecture on Evo quite a few times, and again, you'd be amazed at how many people just don't even know about it.
Yeah.
Okay. What time are we getting to anyway? Look, I'm out of steam. Okay. So we'll come back tomorrow and we'll finish up Satsu Pisces, and then one thing I wanted to discuss a little bit is more of the retrograde phenomena. I want to teach you two systems of how to analyze a chart. One's called the house system of interpretation. Another is a system that came through me called the planetary method. I want to teach them to you so when you combine them, they lead to precise, very precise understanding of the chart. And then from there, the rest of that day, tomorrow and Friday, we'll just get into ever more practice. Does that work for you?